The stars looked peaceful through the window of the horizon dawn. Katie Morgan stood in the research lab, her fingers dancing across the scanner controls as she studied the readings from a nearby planet. She was only 23 years old, but already one of the best xenobiologists in the human fleet. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes reflected the soft glow of the computer screens. Captain Peter Grant walked into the lab, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, someone who treated his crew like family. He handed 1 cup to Katie and smiled at her enthusiasm. She had been awake for 16 hours straight, too excited about the new system they were exploring to sleep. Lisa Hayes, the communications officer, called from the bridge. Her voice sounded worried. She had detected something strange on the long-range sensors. Ships were approaching fast, too fast to be friendly traders. Peter rushed to the bridge with Katie following close behind. Jake Sullivan, their engineer, was already at his station, trying to boost power to the shields. The ships appeared on the main screen. They were dark and covered with strange symbols that glowed red against the black metal. Katie felt her stomach drop. She had seen ships like these in classified reports. The Valkyrie. They were a reptilian species known for their cruelty and their hatred of what they called weaker races. Peter tried to hail them, but there was no response. He ordered Jake to prepare the engines for emergency jump, but it was too late. Green beams shot from the Valkyrie ships and slammed into the horizon dawn. The whole vessel shook violently. Lights flickered and alarms screamed throughout the corridors. Katie grabbed onto a console to keep from falling. Jake worked frantically at his station, trying to reroute power, but another blast hit them directly. An explosion tore through the engine room. Jake turned to look at Peter one last time before the fire consumed him. Katie screamed his name, but there was nothing anyone could do. Their friend was gone in seconds. The Valkyrie ships latched onto the horizon dawn with mechanical arms. Katie heard the horrible sound of metal being torn apart as they forced open the airlocks. Peter grabbed a weapon from the emergency locker and positioned himself between his crew and the door. Lisa stood beside Katie, her face pale but determined. The doors exploded inward. Valkyrie warriors poured into the bridge. They were tall creatures with scales that looked like armor, yellow eyes that showed no mercy, and claws that could tear through steel. Peter fired his weapon, hitting one of them in the chest, but there were too many. A Valkyrie struck him with some kind of energy weapon, and he collapsed to the floor unconscious. Lisa tried to activate the distress beacon, but a Valkyrie grabbed her and threw her against the wall. She hit hard and slumped down, not moving. Katie stood alone, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She raised her hands, showing she would not fight, hoping they might show mercy. One Valkyrie stepped forward. He was larger than the others and wore different armor that marked him as the leader. His yellow eyes studied Katie with cold interest. He spoke in a hissing voice, but the translator on his belt converted his words to English. His name was Inquisitor Zalthex, and he had questions for her. They dragged Katie through the corridors of their ship. The walls were dark and cold, covered with stains she did not want to think about. Other Valkyrie watched as they passed, their eyes filled with contempt. To them, humans were nothing. Just another weak species to be used and discarded. The interrogation room was worse than anything Katie had imagined. Instruments hung from the ceiling, each designed to cause pain in different ways. The floor had channels cut into it for blood to drain away. Katie tried not to think about how many others had died in this room. Zalthex secured her to a metal chair with restraints that bit into her wrists and ankles. He asked her questions about Earth's defenses, about military bases, about human fleet positions. Katie knew some of this information from her security clearance, but she refused to answer. Every fiber of her being rebelled against helping these monsters. The first wave of pain came from a device that sent electricity through her nervous system. It was not like being shocked. It was like every nerve in her body was being set on fire at once. Katie screamed until her throat was raw, but she told them nothing useful. She gave them fake coordinates, wrong numbers, anything but the truth. Zalthex seemed almost impressed by her resistance. Most species broke within minutes, he told her. Humans were proving more stubborn than expected. But everyone broke eventually. It was just a matter of time and pain. Hours blended together in agony. Katie lost track of how long she had been in that chair. They used different instruments, each worse than the last. Her body was covered in burns and cuts. Several of her fingers were broken. Blood dripped from her nose and ears. But still she refused to give them what they wanted. She thought about Jake, who died trying to protect them. She thought about Peter and Lisa, hoping they were still alive somewhere on this ship. She thought about Earth, about her family, about everyone who would suffer if she broke and revealed what she knew. That thought kept her silent even as her body screamed for mercy. Finally, her heart could take no more. The stress and trauma were too much. Katie felt her heartbeat become irregular, then weak, then stop. Darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. The last thing she heard was Zalthex ordering someone to note the time of death. 1437. The pain stopped. Everything stopped. Katie Morgan, xenobiologist and researcher, died in that cold metal chair far from home, surrounded by enemies. Her last thought was a prayer that her silence had been enough, that her death would mean something. Zalthex looked at her lifeless body with disappointment. He had expected more information from a human scientist. Their reputation for resilience was apparently exaggerated. He ordered his guards to dump her body with the other prisoners. They would dispose of all the humans later, after they stripped the Horizon Dawn of anything useful. 2 Velkari warriors unstrapped Katie's corpse and carried her through the corridors. They threw her into a detention cell where Peter and Lisa were being held. Her body landed on the cold floor with a dull thud. The Velkari sealed the door and left, not bothering to check if the other prisoners were awake. In the darkness of that cell, Katie's body lay still and cold. Her heart was silent. Her lungs held no breath. By every measure known to medical science, she was completely and totally dead. The Velkari had won, but they had also made a terrible mistake. They had killed a human who desperately wanted to live, who had something worth fighting for, who refused to accept that this was the end. They would soon learn that some things should not be killed. Peter Grant woke to the worst headache of his life. The stun weapon had left his skull feeling like it was splitting apart. He groaned and tried to sit up, his hands pressing against the cold metal floor. The cell was dark except for a dim red light that barely showed anything. His eyes adjusted slowly. He saw Lisa nearby, still unconscious but breathing. Relief flooded through him. At least she was alive. Then he saw the third shape in the cell and his heart stopped. Katie's body lay crumpled on the floor, her skin pale in the red light, her eyes closed. Peter crawled across the floor to her, his body protesting every movement. He reached out with shaking hands and touched her neck, searching for a pulse. Nothing. Her skin was cold like ice. He pressed his ear to her chest, listening desperately for a heartbeat. Silence. Katie was dead. Grief hit him like a physical blow. Katie had been so young, so full of life and curiosity. She had her whole future ahead of her, and those monsters had killed her. Peter's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to scream, to rage, to tear apart every Velkari on this ship. But what could he do? He was locked in a cell, unarmed, with no way to escape. Lisa stirred behind him. She moaned softly and opened her eyes. Peter heard her move and turned to help her sit up. She looked confused for a moment, then memory flooded back. Her eyes went wide with fear. Where were they? What had happened to the others? Peter did not have the heart to tell her about Katie yet. He helped Lisa lean against the wall and checked her for serious injuries. She had a nasty bump on her head and her arm was bruised badly, but nothing seemed broken. She would live. Unlike Katie. They sat in silence for several minutes, both trying to think of a way out of this nightmare. The Velkari had killed Jake, captured them, and murdered Katie during interrogation. They were probably next. Peter wondered if anyone would ever know what happened to the crew of the Horizon Dawn. Then Katie's finger moved. Peter saw it out of the corner of his eye. Just a small twitch. The kind that sometimes happens to bodies after death as muscles relax. He had seen it before. It meant nothing. But then her finger moved again, more deliberately this time. Lisa saw it too. She grabbed Peter's arm and pointed, her mouth open but no sound coming out. They both stared at Katie's body, not daring to hope, not understanding what they were seeing. Katie's chest suddenly heaved upward. Air rushed into her lungs with a horrible gasping sound, like someone drowning finally breaking the surface. Her whole body convulsed once, twice, then went rigid. Her eyes snapped open. For a moment those eyes glowed with a strange silver light that filled the cell. Peter and Lisa both pressed themselves back against the wall, terrified and amazed at the same time. Then the glow faded and Katie's normal green eyes looked around in confusion. She sat up slowly, her movements stiff and uncertain. Her hands went to her chest, feeling her heart beating strong and steady. She looked at her arms, seeing the burns and cuts from the torture. As Peter and Lisa watched in shock, those injuries began to heal. The burns faded from angry red to pink to normal skin. The cuts closed up like someone was running time backwards. Katie turned her head and saw them staring at her. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. She coughed, clearing her throat, and tried again. Her voice was rough and confused when she finally asked what had happened. Peter found his voice first. He told her she had died. They had thrown her body in here over half an hour ago. Her heart had stopped. She had no pulse. She was cold and dead. And now she was alive and healing before their eyes. Katie looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers. Several of them had been broken during the torture. Now they worked perfectly. She remembered dying. She remembered the pain stopping and darkness swallowing everything. But she also remembered something else, something that felt like a dream but was not a dream. She had felt herself floating in that darkness, but there had been something else there with her. Not a voice exactly, but a presence, something ancient and powerful that had been sleeping inside her. It had asked her a question without words. Did she want to live? Did she have something worth coming back for? Katie had answered yes with every part of her being. She had friends to save. She had people on Earth who loved her. She had so much life she still wanted to live. The presence had responded to that desperate need. It had reached deep into her cells and activated something that had been waiting there for thousands of years. Human evolution had not happened on a safe, gentle world. Earth had been brutal. Ice ages, plagues, predators, disasters of every kind had hammered humanity for millions of years. Most species that faced such constant death had gone extinct, but humans had survived, and buried in their genes was a last-ditch survival mechanism that activated when death came violently, and the will to live was strong enough. Katie tried to explain this to Peter and Lisa, but she was not sure she understood it herself. All she knew was that she felt different now, stronger, more aware. She could hear things she should not be able to hear. Footsteps far down the corridor. Conversations in other parts of the ship. Her eyesight was sharper too, seeing details in the dim light that should have been invisible. She stood up and her movement was too fast, too smooth. Her body felt light and powerful, like she could run for miles without getting tired. Peter and Lisa stood too, staying close together, still not quite believing what they were seeing. Peter's military training kicked in despite his shock. Whatever had happened to Katie, whatever she had become, they could figure it out later. Right now they were prisoners on an enemy ship. They needed to escape. They needed to warn Earth about the Velkari. They needed to get justice for Jake. Katie felt something stir inside her at the mention of escape. It was not just a desire anymore. It was a burning need. The Velkari had killed her. They had tortured her, broken her body and stopped her heart. But she had come back. And now every instinct in her transformed body was screaming for one thing, not just escape. Revenge. She walked to the cell door and examined it. The metal was thick and strong, designed to hold even large prisoners. There was no control panel on this side. No way to override the lock. A normal person would need tools and time to break through. Katie reached out and gripped the edge of the door with both hands. Peter started to tell her it was impossible, that the door was too strong. But his words died in his throat as Katie pulled. Her muscles tensed and the metal began to bend. Slowly at first, then faster. The door groaned and twisted under her hands. Katie's face showed fierce concentration but not strain. She was strong now. Much stronger than any human should be. With a final wrench, she tore the door completely off its frame. The sound of rending metal echoed through the corridor outside. Alarms immediately started blaring. Lights flashed red throughout the ship. The Velkari would know someone had escaped. Katie looked at Peter and Lisa. Her eyes held a determination that bordered on fury. She told them they were not just escaping this ship. They were taking it. The Velkari had made a huge mistake when they killed her. They had awakened something humanity did not even know existed. And now they were going to pay for that mistake. Peter saw the absolute certainty in her eyes and made a decision. He would follow her lead. Whatever Katie had become, she was still his crew member, still someone he trusted. And right now she was their only chance of survival. Lisa nodded too, though her hands were shaking. She had always been brave when it mattered. If Katie said they could take the ship, then they would try. The three humans stepped out of the cell and into the corridor. Somewhere on this ship were weapons they could use. Somewhere were controls they could access. And somewhere was Inquisitor Zalthex, who thought he had killed a helpless human girl. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The corridor stretched ahead of them, dark metal walls lined with pipes and cables. Red alarm lights pulsed in rhythm with the warning sirens. Katie moved forward with confidence that surprised even her. She somehow knew where to go, as if a map of the ship had been downloaded directly into her brain. Peter and Lisa followed close behind. Peter kept looking at Katie's back, still trying to process what he had witnessed. The woman walking ahead of them was Katie, but also something more. She moved like a predator now, all smooth efficiency and coiled power. Every few steps she would pause and tilt her head, listening to sounds they could not hear. Katie stopped at an intersection and held up her hand. She whispered that 4 Velkari were approaching from the left corridor, weapons ready. They would reach this spot in about 30 seconds. Peter looked around frantically for a place to hide, but Katie shook her head. She had a different plan. She positioned herself flat against the wall right at the corner. Peter understood and pulled Lisa back, both of them pressing into a shadowy alcove. Katie waited with perfect stillness, controlling even her breathing. The footsteps got louder. The Velkari were talking to each other in their hissing language, saying the escaped prisoners could not have gotten far. The first Velkari warrior rounded the corner, his weapon raised. Katie moved faster than Peter's eyes could follow. One moment she was still. The next she had grabbed the warrior's arm and twisted. The crack of breaking bone echoed in the corridor. Before the Velkari could even scream, Katie had taken his weapon and struck him in the head with it. He dropped unconscious. The other 3 Velkari reacted quickly, but Katie was quicker. She ducked under one's reaching claws and drove her elbow into his midsection with such force that he doubled over. The weapon she had taken fired a blue energy bolt that hit the 3rd warrior square in the chest. He went down smoking. The 4th tried to retreat and call for help, but Katie was already there. She grabbed his communication device and crushed it in her hand, then rendered him unconscious with a precise strike to his neck. The entire fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. 4 trained Velkari warriors lay on the ground, and Katie was not even breathing hard. She looked down at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. She had not known she could do that. The movements had come naturally, instinctively, as if her body knew things her mind had not learned. Peter emerged from the alcove with Lisa. He picked up one of the Velkari weapons and checked its charge. Still mostly full. Lisa grabbed another weapon, though her hands shook as she held it. Peter asked Katie how she had known what to do, where to hit them for maximum effect. Katie could only shake her head. She did not know. The knowledge was just there when she needed it. They moved deeper into the ship, following Katie's instincts. She led them through maintenance tunnels that were barely tall enough to stand in. The Velkari had not designed these passages for comfort, just for accessing the ship's systems. It made them perfect for moving unseen. As they crawled through the narrow spaces, Katie felt more memories that were not hers. She saw flashes of other humans throughout history. A soldier in an ancient war who had been stabbed through the heart, but stood back up to save his friends. A woman who drowned protecting her children but breathed again to pull them from the water. A man who fell from a great height and rose with bones that healed in minutes. These were not legends or stories. They were real events, real people who had experienced what Katie was experiencing now. The human resurrection capability had always existed, hiding in their genes, activating so rarely that it seemed like miracles or myths, but it was real. It was part of what made humanity survivors. Katie understood now why it happened. Earth had been so dangerous for so long that evolution had built in this desperate last resort. When a human died violently while under extreme stress with a powerful will to survive, sometimes their body refused to accept death. Some ancient genetic switch would flip, flooding their cells with energy, repairing damage and bringing them back changed and stronger. It did not happen every time someone died. It could not be controlled or predicted, but it was real, and Katie was proof. She also sensed that her enhanced abilities would not last forever. Over time, she would become more normal again, though she would always be a bit stronger and faster than she had been before. But right now, in these hours after her resurrection, she was at peak power. They reached a junction where Katie sensed more Velkari approaching. This time there were too many to fight directly. She led Peter and Lisa into a side chamber filled with equipment. They hid behind large containers while a patrol of 8 warriors passed by outside.
Katie could hear their conversation clearly.
They were worried. The escaped human female had killed 4 of their warriors. The Inquisitor was furious and had ordered every available soldier to search for the prisoners. After the patrol passed, Katie noticed what was stored in this chamber. Weapons, lots of them. This was an armory. Peter's eyes lit up when he saw the selection. He moved quickly among the racks, choosing weapons that humans could use effectively. He handed a smaller energy rifle to Lisa and took a larger one for himself. Katie selected a weapon too, though she felt she barely needed it with her new strength. Lisa found a computer terminal in the corner of the armory. She was their communications expert, and even alien systems made sense to her after a few minutes of study. She managed to access the ship's basic systems, though the important controls were locked behind security she could not break yet. What she did find made her blood run cold. She called Peter and Katie over to show them. The terminal displayed a list of human ships the Velkari had captured over the past year. There were dozens of them, and next to each ship was a number indicating prisoners taken. Peter did quick math in his head. There were over 300 humans being held at various Velkari facilities. Katie felt rage building inside her. 300 people. 300 humans who had been captured, probably tortured, possibly killed. The Velkari had been hunting human ships systematically, and no one on Earth even knew it was happening. This was not just about escaping anymore. This was about stopping a threat to all of humanity. Lisa continued working on the terminal. She found something else. Codes for communication frequencies and locations of the facilities where prisoners were held. If they could transmit this information back to human space, Earth's military could mount rescue operations. But they needed to reach the ship's main communication array to send a message strong enough to reach human colonies. Peter studied the ship's layout on the screen. The communication center was 3 decks up, right next to the bridge where Inquisitor Zalthex would be commanding his ship. Getting there would mean fighting through dozens of Velkari warriors. Peter looked at Katie. Could she really do this? Could they really take an entire enemy warship with just 3 people? Katie met his eyes with absolute certainty. Yes, they could. She had died and come back for a reason. The Velkari had killed her thinking they were eliminating a weak human. Instead, they had created something they could not handle. Katie felt power flowing through every cell of her body, strength that seemed impossible but was undeniably real. She told Peter and Lisa the plan. They would fight their way to the communication center. Lisa would send the information about the prisoners back to human space. Then they would take the bridge and capture Zalthex. The Inquisitor would answer for what he had done, not just to Katie and her crew, but to all the humans he had tortured and killed. It was an insane plan. 3 humans against a ship full of armed warriors, but Peter found himself believing it could work. He had seen what Katie could do, and more importantly, he saw the determination in her eyes. She was not going to let the Velkari win. She would fight until her last breath, and apparently even dying would not stop her. They armed themselves heavily and prepared to leave the armory. Katie took point again, her enhanced senses alert for any danger. As they stepped back into the corridor, alarms blared even louder. Someone had found the unconscious warriors Katie had left behind. Now the entire ship knew there were dangerous humans loose aboard. Good, Katie thought. Let them know. Let them be afraid. The Velkari had spent years making humans afraid. Now it was their turn to learn what fear really meant. They had killed Katie Morgan, xenobiologist and researcher, but they had brought back something else. Something stronger. Something angry. Something human. Inquisitor Zalthex stood on the bridge of his warship, his claws tapping against the command console in agitation. Reports kept flowing in that made no sense. The dead human female was alive. More than alive. She was tearing through his ship like some kind of demon from ancient legends. He pulled up security footage on the main screen. There she was, the small human with brown hair who had died in his interrogation chamber. She moved through a corridor with 2 other humans behind her. A patrol of 6 Velkari warriors intercepted them. Zalthex watched as the human female destroyed his warriors in seconds. She moved too fast for the cameras to track properly. Just a blur of motion that left unconscious or dead Velkari in her wake. His second in command? A scarred veteran named Krath, suggested they were witnessing some kind of technology. Perhaps a human combat suit that made the female appear stronger. Zalthex knew better. He had seen her die. He had watched her heart stop and her brain cease function. There had been no suit, no hidden technology. Whatever was happening now was biological, and it terrified him. In Velkari culture, death was final. Once something died, it stayed dead. The idea of resurrection was fantasy, the stuff of primitive religious beliefs, but the evidence was right there on his screens. A dead human was alive and demonstrating abilities that should not exist in any known species. Zalthex ordered all warriors to converge on the human's last known position. He wanted them captured alive if possible. He needed to understand what had happened, how the female had returned. If humans possessed this ability naturally, then the Velkari Empire had severely underestimated this species. If it was some kind of experimental enhancement, then Earth's military was more advanced than intelligence reports suggested. Either way, this information could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Katie sensed the Velkari response before she saw it. She could feel them moving through the ship like a net closing in. She led Peter and Lisa down a different route, using maintenance shafts and service corridors that the main security systems did not monitor as carefully. They climbed up through a vertical shaft, using the pipes and cables as handholds. It was difficult work, especially for Lisa, who was still hurt from earlier. Katie helped her, sometimes literally carrying her up difficult sections. Peter brought up the rear, his weapon ready in case any Velkari discovered them. They emerged on the deck that housed the ship's engineering section. Katie paused, her head tilted as she listened. Something felt wrong. The Velkari were waiting ahead, too many of them, positioned to ambush anyone who came through the main corridor. It was a trap designed to catch them. Peter suggested they find another route, but Katie had a different idea. She told them to wait in the shaft while she dealt with the ambush. Before Peter could argue, she dropped down into the corridor and walked straight toward the trap. She knew exactly where the Velkari were hiding, could hear their breathing and the tiny sounds of their weapons charging. She called out in a clear voice, telling them she knew they were there. She gave them one chance to surrender and stand aside. Silence answered her, then laughter. The Velkari thought one human female, even an enhanced one, could not handle 12 armed warriors. They were wrong. Katie moved the instant the first shot was fired. The energy bolt passed through the space where she had been standing, scorching the wall behind her. She was already among them, her movements a controlled storm of violence. She disarmed one warrior with a grip that shattered his wrist. She used his weapon to shoot another. A third tried to grab her from behind, but she flipped him over her shoulder with such force that he crashed through a wall panel. The fight was brutal and short. Katie did not kill if she could help it, but she showed no mercy either. These warriors had served aboard the ship that murdered Jake and tortured her to death. They deserved everything she gave them. Within a minute, all 12 Velkari were down, groaning or unconscious. Peter and Lisa came out of the shaft and stared at the destruction. Katie stood in the middle of the corridor, barely winded, her fists clenched. Peter asked if she was okay, if the violence bothered her. Katie admitted it did. She had been a scientist, not a soldier. Taking lives or even just hurting people went against everything she believed in. But these creatures had killed her crew and imprisoned hundreds of humans. Someone had to stop them, and right now she was the only one who could. They moved through engineering without encountering more resistance. Most of the Velkari forces were searching other parts of the ship. Lisa found another terminal and accessed more of the ship's systems. She was getting better at understanding their computer language. She discovered the location of the main communication array and, even better, a route to reach it that avoided the most heavily guarded areas. They were halfway to their destination when disaster struck. A squad of Velkari appeared ahead of them, weapons blazing. Peter and Katie returned fire, but Lisa took a hit to her shoulder. The energy bolt burned through her uniform and into her flesh. She cried out and fell against the wall, her weapon clattering to the floor. Katie saw Lisa fall and something inside her snapped. The protective fury that had been simmering in her chest exploded into white-hot rage. She stopped thinking tactically and just reacted. She charged the Velkari squad head-on, moving faster than she had before, her body seeming to blur with pure speed. Peter could barely follow what happened next. Katie tore through the warriors like they were made of paper. She grabbed one by the throat and threw him into two others, knocking all three down. She caught an energy bolt with her bare hand, Her flesh smoking but healing almost instantly, she ripped weapons out of clawed hands and used them as clubs to beat their owners. The entire squad was down in seconds, and Katie stood over them breathing hard, her eyes blazing with protective fury. Peter rushed to Lisa's side. The wound was bad but not immediately fatal. He used a medical kit from his belt to stabilize her, applying emergency sealant to the burn. Lisa was conscious but in terrible pain. She told them to keep going to complete the mission. Peter refused to leave her behind. They would all make it out together or not at all. Katie carefully picked Lisa up, cradling her like a child. Lisa protested weakly that she was too heavy, but Katie barely felt the weight. She told them they were close now. Just one more deck up to the communication center. They could rest once the message was sent. They reached a lift that would take them up. Katie set Lisa down gently while Peter worked the controls. The lift started moving, and for a moment they had peace. Lisa leaned against Katie, exhausted and hurting. She said she could not believe what she was seeing, what Katie had become. It was like something from a science fiction story, the kind where humans had secret powers. Katie smiled despite everything. Maybe it was like a story, but it was real. She had died and come back, and now she was going to make sure the Velkari regretted ever attacking humans. Lisa said that every species in the galaxy was going to think twice about messing with humans after this. Katie hoped so. Humanity deserved to be safe among the stars. The lift doors opened onto chaos. The communication center was right ahead, but so was Inquisitor Zalthex with 20 of his elite guards. They had been waiting, knowing the humans would have to come here eventually. Zalthex stood tall and imposing, his yellow eyes fixed on Katie with a mixture of fear and fascination. He spoke through his translator, his voice echoing in the corridor. He said he had watched her die, had confirmed her death personally. Yet here she stood. He demanded to know what she was, how this was possible. Katie met his gaze without fear. She told him she was human, and that was all he needed to know. Humans did not give up. They did not stay down. And they definitely did not forgive those who hurt them. Zalthex ordered his guards to capture her alive. The elite warriors advanced in formation, weapons ready. Katie set down the weapon she had been carrying. She would not need it for this. Peter tried to say something to warn her or help her, but Katie just smiled at him. She told him to get Lisa to the communication center the moment she created an opening. Then she walked forward to face 20 of the Velkari Empire's best warriors alone. The fight that followed would become legend in both human and Velkari military records. Katie moved like something beyond human, her resurrected body pushed to its absolute limits. She dodged energy bolts that should have hit her. She struck with precision that dropped warriors with single blows. She was hit multiple times but kept fighting, her body healing damage almost as fast as it was inflicted. The elite guards had trained their entire lives for combat. They were the best the Velkari had to offer, but they had never faced anything like Katie. She fought with a desperation and fury born from dying and choosing to return. Every movement carried the weight of everyone she was protecting. Jake, who had died. Lisa, who was wounded. Peter, who trusted her. All the captured humans waiting for rescue. Earth itself, which needed to know about the Velkari threat. One by one, the elite guards fell. Some were unconscious, some were dead, some were too injured to continue fighting. Zalthex watched his best warriors defeated by a single human female, and finally understood the terrible mistake his people had made. They had thought humans were weak prey. Instead, they had found predators who refused to die. Katie stood among the fallen Velkari warriors, her chest heaving with deep breaths. Blood dripped from several wounds that were already starting to close. Her uniform was torn and burned, but she was still standing. All 20 elite guards were down. Some would live, some would not, but none were a threat anymore. Inquisitor Zalthex backed away toward the bridge entrance, his claws reaching for a weapon at his belt. Katie moved faster, crossing the distance between them in a blur. She grabbed his arm before he could draw the weapon and squeezed. Not hard enough to break bone, but enough to make him drop what he was reaching for. She told him to stop, that this was over. Peter helped Lisa into the communication center while Katie kept Zalthex restrained. Lisa collapsed into a chair in front of the main console, her face pale from blood loss and pain. But her hands were steady as they moved across the alien controls. She had studied Velkari systems enough to understand the basics. She just needed a few minutes. Zalthex hissed at Katie, asking what she hoped to accomplish. Even if they sent a message, even if they took his ship, the Velkari Empire would hunt them down. They could not escape. Katie told him they were not trying to escape. They were sending a warning. Every human in the galaxy was going to know what the Velkari had been doing, and Earth's military would come for the prisoners. The Inquisitor laughed bitterly. He said she did not understand galactic politics. The Velkari were powerful, with allies and resources across multiple systems. Humanity was still new to space, barely established beyond their own solar neighborhood. They could not challenge an empire. Katie smiled without humor. Maybe the Velkari were powerful, but they had never fought an enemy that refused to die. Lisa called out that she had accessed the communication array. She was ready to broadcast. Peter told her to send everything they had found. The list of captured ships, the prisoner locations, the evidence of systematic attacks on human vessels. All of it needed to reach human space. Lisa's fingers danced across the console, encoding the data and preparing the transmission. Zalthex tried to lunge for a control panel on the wall, probably trying to activate some kind of security lockdown. Katie yanked him back effortlessly. She told Peter to watch the Inquisitor while she helped Lisa. She moved to the communications station and looked at the data ready to transmit. It was all there. Proof of what the Velkari had done. Coordinates for rescue operations. Everything Earth needed to act. Lisa initiated the broadcast. The message went out in all directions. A powerful signal that would reach multiple human colonies and relay stations. It would take hours for some of them to receive it, but it was out there now. Nothing could stop it. Lisa slumped back in her chair, her part done. Peter checked her wound again, applying more medical sealant. She needed proper treatment soon, but she would survive. Katie turned back to Zalthex. She asked him how many humans he had personally killed or ordered killed. The Inquisitor refused to answer, but his eyes gave him away. Many. Too many. Katie felt anger surge again, but controlled it. Killing him in rage would make her no better than the Velkari. But he would face justice for what he had done. The bridge door opened behind Zalthex. More Velkari warriors poured out, but these ones stopped when they saw the carnage. 20 elite guards down. Their Inquisitor held captive by a human female who should have been dead. The warriors looked uncertain, weapons raised but not firing. Katie made a decision. She told them in a clear voice that this ship was now under human control. They could surrender peacefully or they could fight and lose. She had died once today already, and it had not stopped her. What did they think their weapons would do? The warriors looked at each other, then at the bodies of the elite guards, then back at Katie. Several of them slowly lowered their weapons. Peter could not believe what he was seeing. Velkari warriors surrendering to 3 humans, one of whom was badly wounded. But it was happening. The warriors could see that Katie was not bluffing. She had beaten their best fighters. She was holding their commander, and she looked ready to tear apart anyone else who challenged her. Over the next hour, Katie and Peter secured the ship. More Velkari surrendered as word spread of what had happened. A few tried to resist and learned quickly why that was a mistake. Katie was everywhere at once, moving through the ship with her enhanced speed, disarming resistance before it could organize. Lisa managed to access the ship's main computer from the communication center. She locked out most of the Velkari crew from critical systems and gave control to Peter. He had served on military vessels before and understood ship operations. With Lisa guiding him through the alien interface, he managed to take command of navigation and life support. They gathered the Velkari crew in the main cargo bay, over 300 of them, all disarmed and under guard. Katie stood before them with Zalthex at her side. She told them they were going to jump to the nearest human outpost and turn themselves in. They would surrender peacefully to human authorities and face judgment for their crimes. Any attempt to resist or sabotage the ship would be met with immediate consequences. Zalthex asked what would happen to him. Katie said he would stand trial for the murder of humans, for torture, for the systematic attacks on civilian vessels. If human law was just, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. If it was not just, well, that was not her decision to make, but he would answer for what he had done. The Inquisitor asked why she did not just kill him now. He had killed her after all. She had every right to revenge. Katie was quiet for a moment before answering. She said that yes, he had killed her. And yes, part of her wanted revenge, but she was still human, even with her enhanced abilities. Humans believed in justice and law, not simple vengeance. He would face proper judgment. Peter set course for the nearest human military station, a place called Outpost Sentinel about 6 hours away at jump speed. Lisa sent another message ahead, warning the outpost that they were coming with a captured Velkari warship and hundreds of prisoners. The response came back quickly, filled with disbelief and questions, but they acknowledged the message. Katie found a quiet corner of the bridge and sat down for the first time in hours. The adrenaline was fading, and she could feel her enhanced abilities starting to diminish slightly. The incredible strength and speed were still there, but not as intense as before. Her body was slowly returning to something closer to normal, though she sensed she would always be stronger and faster than she had been before her death. Peter sat beside her, bringing water and emergency rations. He told her that what she had done was impossible. No single person should have been able to capture a warship. Katie smiled tiredly and said that technically, 3 people had captured it. She could not have done it without him and Lisa. Peter shook his head. They had helped, yes, but this was her victory. She was the one who had died and come back. She was the one who had fought through an army. They talked quietly about what would happen next. Katie would need to be studied by human doctors and scientists. Her resurrection was unprecedented, at least in modern medical records. If other humans carried the same genetic potential, Earth needed to know about it. Not to create super soldiers, Katie insisted, but to understand their own species better. Lisa joined them, moving slowly because of her injury. She said the communication center was tracking responses to their broadcast. Human colonies across 3 sectors were erupting with activity. Military vessels were being dispatched to the prisoner locations. Earth Command was demanding full reports. The news was spreading fast. Soon the entire galaxy would know what had happened here. As they approached Outpost Sentinel, Katie looked out at the stars through the bridge windows. Somewhere out there were the families of Jake and all the other humans killed by the Velkari. They deserved to know that justice was coming. They deserved to know that humanity would not accept being prey. The outpost appeared on the scanners, a large station bristling with weapons and docking bays. Peter opened a channel and identified the vessel as the captured Velkari ship, now under human control. The station commander responded with barely contained shock. She confirmed they were cleared to dock and that Marines were standing by to take custody of the prisoners. Katie insisted on being the one to hand over Zalthex personally. She walked him through the docking tube as human Marines poured onto the ship. The station commander, a stern woman named General Hayes, met them at the airlock. She looked at Katie, at the Velkari Inquisitor in restraints, at Peter and the wounded Lisa behind them, and struggled to find words. Katie made a brief report. Her crew had been attacked. Jake Sullivan had been killed in the initial assault. She herself had been tortured to death. Then she had come back. With Peter's tactical help and Lisa's technical expertise, they had taken the enemy ship. All the data about Velkari operations against humans had been transmitted. The prisoners needed medical attention and proper legal processing. General Hayes listened to the impossible story and made a decision. She would take Katie's word for everything and sort out the details later. Right now, she had hundreds of Velkari prisoners to secure and wounded humans to treat. She ordered medics to take Lisa immediately. She assigned a full company of Marines to guard the prisoners, and she asked Katie to come. 3 months after the incident, Katie stood before the Galactic Council on their neutral station orbiting a blue star. Representatives from 70 different species filled the chamber, their various forms creating a bizarre collection of shapes and colors. Some breathed oxygen like humans, others required special atmosphere suits. All of them watched Katie with fascination and varying degrees of fear. The presiding speaker, a tall crystalline being named Ixara, called the session to order. Katie had been invited to testify about the Velkari attacks and her subsequent resurrection. The council needed to understand what had happened and what it meant for relations between species. Katie had agreed to come, though public speaking terrified her far more than fighting Velkari warriors had. She walked to the central platform and began her testimony. She spoke simply and clearly, describing the attack on the Horizon Dawn, the death of Jake Sullivan, her own capture and torture. Some of the representatives looked uncomfortable as she detailed the methods Zalthex had used. Others looked angry that such things had been done in secret. The Velkari representative, a different inquisitor who looked ashamed, stared at the floor. Katie described her death, She did not spare details about how it felt, how the pain had stopped and darkness had consumed her. She wanted them to understand that she had been completely dead, not merely injured or unconscious. Medical scans from the Valkyrie ship confirmed cardiac arrest and brain death. By every definition known to science, she had died. Then she described waking up. The confusion, the pain of air returning to empty lungs, the strange silver light in her vision. She explained how her injuries had healed before her friends' eyes, how strength and speed beyond normal human capability had flooded her body. She told them about taking the ship, defeating trained warriors, and forcing the Valkyrie to surrender. The chamber erupted in discussion when she finished. Some species demanded proof, though the evidence was overwhelming. Others wanted to know if all humans could do this. Katie explained what human scientists had discovered in the months since. The resurrection capability existed in roughly 3 out of every 1,000 humans. It was rare but real, built into human genetics by millions of years of survival on a deadly world. It could not be controlled or predicted. It only activated when specific conditions were met: violent death, extreme stress, and an overwhelming will to survive. Even then, it did not always work. But when it did, the affected human would return with temporary enhanced abilities that faded over days or weeks, leaving them permanently improved, but not superhuman. Ixara asked the question many were thinking. Did this mean humans were dangerous? Should other species fear them? Katie considered her answer carefully. She said that humans wanted peace and cooperation. They had no desire to conquer or dominate, but they also would not tolerate being victimized. The resurrection capability was not a weapon humans had created. It was a survival trait they had inherited. Any species that attacked humans might face an enemy that refused to die, and that was something to consider. The Valkyrie representative asked to speak. The council recognized him, though many delegates looked hostile toward anything Valkyrie. He stood with difficulty, his pride clearly wounded. He said that his people had made a terrible mistake. They had judged humans by the standards of other species, assuming physical weakness meant easy prey. They had been completely wrong. The Valkyrie Empire now understood that humanity was resilient in ways no other species had imagined. They would never again underestimate humans. Katie listened to his words and felt some satisfaction. The Valkyrie had learned their lesson, purchased with the blood and pain of too many humans. But she also felt sadness. Jake would never see this moment. The 300 freed prisoners bore scars that would last forever. Victory had been expensive, and not everyone had survived to enjoy it. After the council session, several species approached Katie privately. They wanted to know more about humanity, about Earth, about the potential for friendship. Katie found herself becoming an unofficial ambassador, answering questions and correcting misconceptions. Many species had thought humans were soft because they valued peace and cooperation. Now they understood that choosing peace was not the same as being weak. Peter and Lisa attended the council session as witnesses. Afterward, the 3 of them walked through the station's observation deck, looking at the stars through the massive windows. Lisa's shoulder had healed well, though she still wore a brace. Peter looked tired but satisfied. They had done something important together. Lisa asked Katie how she felt about becoming famous across the galaxy. Katie grimaced. She had never wanted fame. She had been a scientist, someone who studied alien life from a safe distance. Now she was known everywhere as the human who died and came back. She received message requests from media outlets, scientists, politicians, and ordinary people who wanted to hear her story. It was overwhelming. Peter suggested she could retire if she wanted. Earth would take care of her, given what she had been through. But Katie shook her head. She could not just stop. There was too much to do. Other humans had experienced resurrection events throughout history, most of them never understood or recorded. Katie wanted to find them, study their experiences, and help future cases. She wanted to ensure that if another human died and came back, they would not face it alone and confused. She had already been approached by Earth's defense forces about starting a new program. They wanted to document every known resurrection case and provide support for survivors, not to create super soldiers or weapons, Katie had insisted, but to help people who had been through trauma understand what had happened to them. The military had agreed and Katie was put in charge. The program would be called the Phoenix Initiative. named after the mythical bird that rose from its own ashes. Katie liked the symbolism. Every human who came back from death was like a phoenix, reborn through fire and pain. They deserved support and understanding, not exploitation. Over the next 6 months, Katie traveled across human space, meeting others who had experienced resurrection. She found a cargo hauler named Danny, who had died in a decompression accident but woke up minutes later and saved his entire crew. She met a doctor named Grace who had been killed during a hospital attack, but returned to continue treating patients. She found a young man named Chris who had drowned but revived to pull his sister from the water. Each story was different, but they all shared common elements: violent death, desperate circumstances, and an overwhelming need to survive or protect others. The resurrection capability seemed to respond to that need, that refusal to accept that this was the end. Katie interviewed each survivor, recorded their experiences, and helped them understand what had happened. She also worked with human geneticists to understand the mechanism better. They discovered that the resurrection trait was linked to multiple genes that had been preserved throughout human evolution. These genes affected cellular repair, metabolic efficiency, and nervous system function. When activated all at once under specific conditions, they created the resurrection effect. The research had implications beyond understanding the phenomenon. The same genetic pathways that allowed resurrection also seemed to protect against certain diseases and aging effects. Humans with the resurrection genes, even if never activated, tended to be healthier and longer-lived than average. Evolution had given humanity a gift, though one purchased through millions of years of surviving on a dangerous world. Katie returned to Earth for the first time since the incident. She visited her family, who had thought her dead until news of her resurrection reached them. Her mother cried and held her for a long time. Her father asked 100 questions about what it had been like. Her younger brother looked at her like she was a superhero from a comic book. She also visited Jake Sullivan's family. They lived in a small town by the ocean, and his parents welcomed her into their home despite their grief. They wanted to know about his last moments, whether he had suffered. Katie told them the truth. Jake had died quickly trying to protect his crew. He had been a hero. His parents thanked her for bringing back the information that led to freeing the other prisoners. Jake's death had not been in vain. Katie placed flowers at a memorial Earth had erected for all humans killed by the Valkyrie attacks. Over 100 names were carved into the black stone. Jake's name was there, along with so many others. Katie stood before the memorial and made a silent promise. She would ensure these deaths meant something. She would work to make humanity stronger and safer among the stars. And she would never forget what the Valkyrie had done. Inquisitor Zalthek stood trial on Earth for crimes against humanity. Katie attended every day of the proceedings, sitting in the gallery and watching justice unfold. The evidence was overwhelming. Zalthex had ordered the attacks on human vessels, had personally tortured dozens of prisoners, and had caused the deaths of over 30 humans, including Katie herself. The court found him guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment on a secure facility, where he would be kept in comfortable but permanent confinement. Some people argued he should be executed, but Earth's justice system did not allow capital punishment. Katie found herself satisfied with the sentence. Zalthex would